Exercise for reviving your self-worth. The following exercise will help you get in touch with meaningful aspects of your character and revitalize feeling of self-worth. 1. Make a written list of 5 characteristic attribute or trait that you value highly that you possess within yourself. Try to keep your list relevant to the domain in which the rejection occurs. It is important to take the time to think about the quality that really matter to you. For example, if you have been rejected by a romantic partner and you know the following qualities to be true, you might list items such as caring, loyal, good listener, considerate, and emotionally available. 2. Rank your list of characteristics according to the order of importance to you. 3. Choose 2 of the top 3 attributes you listed and write the short essay about each one covering the following point. Why the specific quality is important to you, how this attribute influences your life, why this attribute is an important part of your self-image. Treatment C. Replenish feeling of social connection. Although the sting of rejection can make us hesitant to engage others, we should make effort to overcome these fears and turn to our social network for support or find other ways to refuel our feeling of social connections. Social support mitigates stress of all kinds, but it is especially valuable in the wake of rejection. It creates an immediate reminder of our significant relationship, which in turn can help restore depleted feeling of belonging. In one study, even a brief exchange with a friendly experimenter was sufficient to reduce subject aggression following a social rejection. In another, instant messaging online with an unfamiliar peer after a rejection restores adolescents and young adult self-esteem. Getting social support from our close friends and confidant following rejection can sometimes be challenging because they are likely to underestimate the pain the rejection in question caused us. Estimating visceral and physical pain, whether our own or that of others, is something we are all bad at. For example, the majority of women who plan to forego pain medication during childbirth reverse their decision once they go into labor. Family members, friends, teachers of bullied students who is resorted to desperate measures are often stunned because they had not appreciated the magnitude of the distress the person was feeling. A recent and compelling study found that teachers who were first put through the ball-tossing exclusion experiment had a far greater appreciation for the emotional pain a bullied student felt than the teachers who were not made to feel rejected. They also recommend that the bully get a more severe punishment as a result. Social support can be even more crucial when the rejection we experience involves discrimination. Much as we would like to believe we are an enlightened society, our track record when it comes to accepting those who are different from ourselves are the ways. Race, nationality, sexual orientation, religious belief, disability, gender, and age are all factors that cause millions of people to face extremely painful rejection by their friends, family, employer, neighbor, and stranger. Seeking support from members of our group after being the target of discrimination has been shown to reduce feeling of anger and depression, strengthen our group identity, and counterbalance the harmful effect of being devalued by a dominant culture. Find a new affiliation with a better fit. Our need to belong has some substitutability, meaning that new relationship and membership can psychologically replace those that have ended, especially if they provided a better fit for our personality and interests. Painful as rejection are, we can always view them as an opportunity to evaluate whether the romantic partner, social circle, friend, or employer in question was a good fit for our personalities, interests, lifestyles, or career. Our choice of social group is often motivated by circumstances we get close to, randomly assigned college, roommates, colleges we met at work, or the parent of our children, playmates. While many such friendships shadow other dissolve when they outgrow them, this is especially common when the circumstances that brought us together change. when we graduate from college, move to a new job, or our children stop playing with theirs. Despite the initial sting of rejection we feel, we might later realize we are far less upset about losing the relationship or friendship that we initially thought. Sometimes merely spending time with a group with whom we feel a strong connection can help replenish feeling of social connectedness, even if few words are spoken. When seeking one-on-one social support, we should be thoughtful about our choices, especially if we are still hurting from the wounds of a fresh rejection. Dear friends might care for us deeply, but if they are limited in their capacity to express empathy and support, they might not be our best choice. Anyone who has suffered a serious illness or physical injury or struggle with a disability has probably experienced people feeling uncomfortable and looking away, avoiding contact, forgetting to call or a visit, and even losing touch entirely. Cancer patients and those with other illnesses often join support group to help manage the stress of the illness and their treatment while gaining support from others who have faced similar struggle and rejection. Have a social snack. Although it is best to connect with those who can provide social support and feeling of connection, it might not always be possible for us to do so. In the film Castaway, Chuck Nolan stranded alone on an island for 4 years, during which he copes with the social starvation by looking at a photograph of his girlfriend Kelly, by talking aloud to a volleyball he names Wilson, and who becomes his much beloved companion. Much like having a snack eases our hunger when we don't have the opportunity to eat a full meal, snacking, a reminder of our significant emotional connection, eases our social hunger when we feel rejected, excluded, or alone. Social snacking can take many forms, but scientists have found that photographs of loved ones are one of the most emotionally nutritious snacks we can consume after being rejected. In one study, subjects placed photographs on their desks of either loved one or celebrities and were asked to vividly relive a significant rejection experience from their own past. Subjects with picture of celebrity of then on their deaths suffer a large drop in mood as a result of recalling the rejection, while those with picture of loved one registered almost no change in the mood at all. Such a finding implies that teens and tweens entering the gauntlets of middle school might be well advised to replace posters of musician and actor with glossy 8x10s of grandpa white envelope on flossy. Photographs are not the only social snack with nutritional value. Other experiments found that merely recalling positive relationship or warm interaction we have had with our nearest and dearest was sufficient to reduce the amount of aggression people felt after being rejected. Reading meaningful email or letter, watching video of loved one, or using value memento of those to whom we feel most connected also have nutritional value as a social snack. Mementos, an inanimate object, can also have significant calorie value, especially when a rejection is compounded by general loneliness, as well as the case for Chang Nolan with Wilson. The next time we ask someone on a date or apply for a new job, we might want to have pictures of our friends and loved ones available in our pocket just in case, or if we must, a volleyball. Treatment summary: replenishing feeling of social connections. Dosage: make sure to administer whenever you experience a rejection, since there are numerous ways in which you might be able to replenish feeling of social reconnection. You may wish to apply several forms of this treatment as necessary. Effective for replenishing your need to belong and reducing anger and aggressive urge. Secondary benefits: soothing hard feeling and emotional pain and rebuilding damaged self-esteem. Treatment D. Desensitize yourself. Anyone who has ever made cold calls knows how difficult it is to make the first few calls. It's extremely unpleasant to hear "no thanks" and have the phone slam in your ear, but something interesting happened around the fifth or sixth call. We begin to take no much less personally. We shrug it off, strike a line through the entry, and move on to the next person on our list. Actor, musician, and performer have the same experience. If an actor rarely auditions, getting rejected is likely to feel painful, but those who audition several times a week find it much easier to let such a rejection go. The reason this happens is because of a physiological process called desensitization. Desensitization. The more we are exposed to situations we find uncomfortable or unpleasant, the more used to them we become and the less they disturb us. Of course, this is not true for all situations, and it certainly is not true for some of the more significant of profound rejection we might encounter. Some life experiences are acutely painful and emotionally damaging no matter how repetitive they become. But when it comes to situations such as asking people out on dates, calling prospective employee for a job, applying to internship or other educational program, or initiating new friendship, trying to desensitize ourselves can be beneficial. I once had a male patient in his 20s whose fear of rejection made him hesitant to approach women, and I gave him the task of asking out 9 women in one weekend. He had plans to attend 3 different social events, and I promised him that if he approached 3 women per event, by the time he got to the third, he would feel very differently about the prospect of getting turned down. Interestingly, merely agreeing to the challenge had an immediate impact on him. The thought of approaching so many women made me feel kind of confident before I even began. Once I accepted that I would getting rejected a lot, it made the idea of any woman rejecting me seems more manageable for some strange reason. As we know now, that strange reason is actually the sensitization. My patient never made it to the third social event. He struck out there 3 times at the first event of the weekend, but was shocked when 2 women gave him their number at the second, and one of them was not even fake. He reported happily. The young women the young man ended up skipping the third event in order to go on a date with a woman who had given him her known fake number. The sensitization can be an effective technique for reducing the emotional impact of rejection, but it should be used both sparingly and wisely. It is one of those treatments that should come with the clear warning signs on the label. Readers should be advised to treat themselves with the sensitization only if they feel their self-esteem is up for the challenge, and only after giving careful thought to how they could implement the treatment in ways they would find beneficial. The most important aspect is to concentrate our effort into a limited time frame. As spreading out the task over time dilutes it and renders it ineffective. For example, if my patient had not several social events planned, it would be half harder for him to find the right circumstances in which to ask out 9 women within 3 days. Treatment summary: desensitize yourself. Dosage: administer for specific tasks only when seeking to initiate dates or friendship, when applying to jobs, internship, or other program, or when making cold calls. Caution: use sparingly and wisely, as this treatment involves significant discomfort. Use only if you feel your self-esteem can tolerate being exposed to numerous minor rejection. Effective for creating a layer of resilience to future rejection so as to reduce the hard feeling and emotional pain they evoke and the damage to self-esteem they cause. When to consult a mental health professional. Applying emotional first aid following rejection should suit each of the 4 wounds we typically suffer as a result of such experience and reduce our risk of long-term physiological complications. Treating older rejection may also be beneficial, as it can help nudge us toward the path of healing and recovery. However, some rejections are so painful and the ones they create are so deep. Emotional first aid alone is not sufficient to correct the physiological damage they cause. If the rejection you have experienced is profound, or if you have experienced chronic rejection over a period of time, you might benefit from seeking the advice of a mental health professional. Chapter 2: Loneliness, Relationship Muscles Weakness. Our world is shrinking. Social media platforms allow us to stay in touch with dozens if not hundreds of friends at once. Dating websites offer us love is more boards of potential mates we can peruse from the comfort of our homes, and a simple click of a computer key allows us to forge new connection with a stranger from across the globe who share our interests and passions. Yet, despite this era of unprecedented global human connection, More people than ever are suffering from severe loneliness. Yeah, what determines our loneliness is not the quantity of our relationship, but rather their subjective quality, the extent to which we perceive ourselves to be socially or emotionally isolated. Indeed, many of us have a trash book full of casual acquaintances, yet still ache from the lack of deep friendship. Some of us have a tight network of supportive friends yet feel the acute absence of a romantic partner. We might spend our days surrounded by work colleagues you feel removed and isolated from all of them. We might be blessed with a strong familial relationship, but find ourselves geographically distant from those who care for us most. Those of us who are fortunate enough to grow into old age with our health and faculties intact might experience a rising tide of loneliness as we witness friends and partners succumb to illness and die, one after the other. What loneliness and cigarette smoking have in common? Having meaningful relationship is essential for leading a happy and self-fulfilled life, but chronic loneliness can damage us in a way that go far beyond limiting our basic happiness. In addition to the emotional pain and longing loneliness causes, it also associated with clinical depression, suicidal thoughts and behavior, hostility, and sleep disturbances. Most important, loneliness has an alarming effect on our general health. It alters the functioning of our cardiovascular system, our endocrine system, and even our immune system. As an illustration of how directly loneliness impacts our physical health, one study found that in otherwise healthy college students, lonely students had a significantly poorer response to flu shots, and non-lonely students did. Loneliness also causes a decline in our mental abilities, including poor decision-making, decreased attention and concentration, impaired judgment, and more rapid progression of Alzheimer's disease. Shocking as it may seem, loneliness possesses just as large a risk factor for our long-term physical health as cigarette smoking does, as it literally shaves years of our life expectancy. While cigarette packs some with health advisories, few of us are aware of the danger of inhaling 2 packs a day of social isolation. As a result, feeling lonely rarely triggers a sense of urgency, and we rarely prioritize we need to break free of its clutch and treat our psychological wounds. Loneliness is contagious. Another factor that adds urgency to our need to treat the physiological wound loneliness inflicts is that recent studies have demonstrated something rather stunning. Loneliness is contagious. One study tracked the spread of loneliness with social network over time and found that loneliness spreads through a clear contagious process. Individuals who had contact with lonely people at the start of the study were more likely to become lonely themselves by the end of it. Further, the virulence of the contagion depended on the degree of closeness between the lonely and non-lonely person. The closer a non-lonely individual were to a lonely person, the more virulent the effect of the contagion, and the lonelier they became later on. Specifically, scientists found that the lonely individual were continually pushed toward the periphery of their social network and into positions that were increasingly more isolated. Once people were in close contact with the lonely people, they became affected and were pushed toward the periphery as well. Alarmingly, this contagion was transmitted from one person to another, even beyond the immediate circle of the lonely person, such that it spread throughout the entire social network. Such studies have demonstrated both with how loneliness is an epidemic proportion in today's society. Unfortunately, despite its contagiousness and despite the severity of the health risk it poses, loneliness remains one of the most neglected physiological injuries we sustain in daily life. Few of us realize how crucial it is to treat the physiological wounds loneliness inflicts, and fewer still know how to do so effectively. The psychological wounds loneliness inflicts. Given the severity of the risk loneliness poses to our physical and mental health, we should make every effort to escape its impact as soon as possible. However, two factors are likely to make it challenging for us to do so. First, loneliness causes us to become overly critical about ourselves and those around us, and it makes us judge our existing relationship too negatively, all of which impact our interaction with others. Second, one of the more insidious effects of loneliness is that it leads us to behave in self-defeating ways that diminish the quality and quantity of our social connection even further. As a result, the very fibers that comprise our relationship muscles, our social and communication skills, our ability to see things from other person's perspective, and our ability to empathize and understand how others feel become weak and are likely to function poorly when we need them the most. To be clear, it's not our fault that we are lonely, nor is it usually a reflection of our social desirability. But regardless of the circumstances that cause it, once loneliness sets in, it triggers a set of psychological reactions that can lead us to inevitably perpetuate our situation and even to make it worse. Because such a dynamic usually operates outside our awareness, the most important tool we can carry with us going forward is open mind. We might strongly believe we have done everything in our power to change our situation, that we are certainly doing nothing to make matters worse. But by being open to the possibility that our behavior might be contributing to our predicament, we can be open to discovering ways to change them. Difficult as it is to open our hearts and minds, to challenge our established perspective, and to take emotional risks, we must be brave enough to do so if we wish to treat our loneliness. 1. Painful misperceptions. Why we feel invisible, but our loneliness is not. People confide many negative things about themselves to their therapists, but one of the things people rarely have the courage to admit is how lonely they feel. Loneliness carries a stigma of shame and self-blame that operates in all our mind to some extent. Over 40% of adults will suffer from loneliness in their lifetime, and virtually all of them will think poorly of themselves because of it. Indeed, one of the more significant emotional wounds loneliness creates is that it leads us to develop inaccurate perception of ourselves as well as the other, and to take too harsh a view of our existing relationship and social interaction. Lionel, a former World War II officer who received Nobel's Medal for Valor, was referred to me for a physical therapy some years ago by his daughter, a social worker who lived out of town and was concerned about her father's increasing social isolation. Lionel lived alone, and although his daughter called him every day, their conversations were usually quite brief, as Lionel believed that phones are for making appointments, not for idle chit-chat. I quickly learned that Lionel was not a fan of any kind of chit-chat, idle or otherwise, something that made our session somewhat challenging at first. For example, my effort to assess the extent of Lionel's social isolation went something like this. Who else do you speak with regularly other than your daughter? Housekeeper? Comes twice a week, cooks and clean. Tell me about the conversation you have with her. She tells me what she made. I leave her money on the counter. What about other family members? No relative other than my daughter. What about friends from the service or even former colleagues? Are you in touch with any of them? No. What do you think that is? Because they're dead. I resisted the urge to sigh and gave Lionel a sympathetic nod. I kept probing and eventually discovered that Lionel did engage in one regular social activity. He belonged to a chess club. Every Tuesday, Lionel would put on a jacket and tie and go down to the senior center to play a couple of games. Unfortunately, as far as games go, chess is about as conducive to social interaction as a solitaire is, if not less so. True. Chess does require two people to play, but any talking during the game is strictly discouraged as it to interfere with the concentration of the other player. Do you play with the same people? I inquired. I was curious about whether any of the regular tended to meet outside of chess club hours. Mostly. Have you ever socialized with any of them? They are not interested. How do you know? Why would they want to socialize with me? I'm 80. I doubted that age was the real issue. The club wasn't for senior after all. How much younger could the other players be? You are 80 and they are? Not interested. Do they socialize with one another? sometimes, and they have never invited you to join with them. They are not interested. Lionel was convinced the other younger member of the class club would remove any attempt he made to forge friendship with them, despite the fact that he had no evidence whatsoever that his age or anything about him would cause them to snub him. But he was determined to avoid disappointment and rejection at all costs. He arrived right after before the game time and left immediately following the last round. He approached no one and spent coffee breaks sitting in the corner reading a book. In other words, he gave the other class chess club members no opportunity whatsoever to get to know him. Lionel had already been suffering from loneliness for some years when he first met, and his self-defeating strategy were already well entrenched. However, the damage loneliness inflicts on our perception of social situation can happen extremely quickly. For example, scientists found that simply asking college students to recall a time in their life when they felt lonely and socially isolated was sufficient to elicit from them a more negative assessment of their current social support system, as well as to boost their shyness, increase their social anxiety, cause a drop in their mood and self-esteem, and impair their optimism. Loneliness also causes us to evaluate others more harshly and to perceive our interaction with friends and loved ones more negatively than we would if we were not lonely. Another study videotaped students as they interact with a friend and then asked them to rate the quality of the interaction and that of the friendship. Lonely individuals rated both their interaction and their friendship far more negatively than non-lonely people did. The participants were then shown the videotapes again 1 week later. While there was no change in the assessment of non-lonely people, lonely people rated their friendship even more negatively the second time around. Lionel believed the member of the chess club ignored him and marginalized him because he was essentially invisible to them. However, the tragic irony of loneliness is that while we often feel invisible to others, our loneliness is usually very visible to them indeed. Numerous studies have found that lonely people are easily recognizable to others, and that once we are judged as being lonely, we are likely to be viewed as negatively as a result. Lonely people are often seen as less attractive and even less intelligent than non-lonely people. The bottom line is that loneliness affects perception in numerous ways. It impacts how we perceive ourselves and others, as well as how we perceive the quality of our interaction and our relationships. Loneliness also impacts how others perceive us, making us appear less interesting and less appealing as social prospect. The combination of these factors makes it extremely difficult to set our cloak of invisibility and engage in successful effort to forge new social connections or deepen existing ones. 2. Self-defeating purposes. Why trying harder leads to failure. Many journeys into loneliness begin during period of transition and change. College freshmen often feel extremely lonely when they first arrive at college, surrounded by unfamiliar faces, far from home, removed from the comfort of their friendship. Divorce, separation, and bereavement, especially when they befall us unexpectedly, can leave us entirely unprepared for the palpable loneliness that accompanies such a losses. When work, the colleges provide our primary source of social interaction and engagement. Losing our job can mean losing our entire social support system when we most need it. Relocation and emigration are often characterized by extended period of loneliness as we labor to build new social and support networks from scratch. In each of these cases, we typically emerge from loneliness once we adjust to our new realities and reboot our social infrastructures. Most college freshmen eventually make new friends. Divorced people typically begin to date within a year following their separation. Looking for a new job often requires us to network and to contact people with whom we lost touch, and most of us eventually forge social intimate connection in our new towns and communities. Yet at times, the cold creep of loneliness extends far beyond the normative adjustment period. We become trapped in it, paralyzed by wave of emotional pain, defeated by feeling of worthlessness and helplessness, and overcome by the devastating emptiness of our profound social and emotional isolation. Why does this happen? What is that prevent some of us from breaking free from the bonds of loneliness and getting our life back on track? The answer is that, in addition to painful misperception, loneliness also drives us into a cycle of self-protection and avoidance that causes us to create self-fulfilling prophecies and to inadvertently push away the very people we hope to engage. Serena, a high school teacher I worked with recently, found herself in exactly such a vicious cycle, and she was entirely unaware of it. What brought her to physical therapy was her non-existent dating life. At first, I was at a loss to understand why. She had never been in a serious relationship. She was in her mid-30s, and furthermore, she was simply stunning. I had no doubt that she received plenty of attention from men. I soon learned that Serena's appearance had gone through a radical transformation 4 years earlier when she lost 80 pounds. I was heavy my whole life. Men would talk right past me as if I was not even in the room, and trust me, Serena added with a wistful smile, I was hard to miss. No, the stare, the smile, the wink, somehow it still feels the same, like they are responding to my appearance, but when it comes to who I am as a person, they are still looking right past me. Serena was desperate to find a husband, but she was equally desperate to avoid getting hurt. While her hesitancy and mistrust were certainly justified after the years of rejection and loneliness she would experience, her fear caused her to come across as withdrawn, defensive, and suspicious. As a result, her dates with the men were often tense and awkward, and few of the men expressed an interest in seeing her again. Their failure to follow up only expressed an interest in seeing her again. Their failure to follow up only confirmed Serena's suspicious that they were never interested in the real her to begin with. The fact that the real Serena spent every moment of her dates hiding behind a physiological wall and was never truly present in the first place was something she never considered. The reason we get trapped in such cycle is that loneliness tips the balance of our social motivation. Once we feel vulnerable and socially disconnected, we become intensely self-protective and we seek to minimize any potential negative responses and our rejection from others. As a result, we approach people with distrust, suspicious, cynicism, anxiety, or we make effort to avoid them altogether because we don't expect our social interaction to be positive, and we make a favor effort to seek them out, and we are less responsive to them when they occur. Unfortunately, the longer our loneliness lasts, the harder it can become to change our perception and behavior and to break the cycle of self-defeating thoughts and behaviors that perpetuate it. We end up behaving in ways that push away the very people who could alleviate our loneliness, and we then feel their distance is further evident of our basic undesirability. As a result, we feel like a passive victim in harsh world and fail to realize the extent to which we are an active contributor to our own predicament. 3. Atrophied relationship muscles. We use them or we lose them. Alban, a successful sales executive, came to couple of therapy with his wife, Blanca. After a month of arguing on her part, Blanca accuses me of being married to my job, and I guess I am. It's not what I want to be, but my job demands it. Blanca gets frustrated that I have to work even when I am home, and I totally understand how she feels. Alban put his arm around his wife and gave her a wink. I kept telling her it's natural for the other women to feel jealous. Blanca quickly pulled away. You know, I don't think that's funny, Blanca turned with and said. He keeps telling people that joke and I hate it. She turned back to Alban and her eyes welled with tears. It's not what you are away so much that bother me. It's that there is a real disconnect between us when you are home. There's no affection, no romance, no intimacy. I am lonely and miserable and you don't care. Alban is also welled up. Of course, I care. And I feel lonely too, but it's hard to connect when you are angry all the time. Last week I brought you a flower and a card for Valentine's Day, and all you did was yell at me. Because you never even gave them to me. You were in such a rush to check email from work, you just left them on the kitchen counter. I only discovered them 2 hours later, and by then you were already asleep. But I got them for you. You keep telling me it's the total that counts. Accept it, doesn't it? You got them for me, but you didn't think to give them to me. Your thought was to leave them on the kitchen counter in the same spot you leave money for the cleaning lady. As their discussion progressed, it became evident that leaving the flower on the kitchen counter was not the only instance of Alban's good intention going awry. He clearly cared about Blanca, but something went consistently wrong when it came to translating his feeling into action. Given how angry Blanca felt and the level of disconnection between them, it had clearly been going wrong for some time. When we lack meaningful and deep connection with others or when we fail to invest in the relationship we have, we stop exercising the skills that's required to maintain such relationship. Our relationship muscle function in much the same way regular muscles do. We fail when we fail to use relationship muscle regularly. The problem is we are often unaware of just how weak our relationship muscle have already become. Alban believed these relationship muscles were functioning properly, but they were not true. He would invest the thought and effort in getting Blanca flower in a car, but leaving his gift on the kitchen counter and forgetting about them undid any positive impact in his effort might have had. When we try to walk after spending a week in bed with the flu, we are often surprised by how our legs buckle under us and leave us in a heap on the floor. Well, we are quick to realize our muscles have weakened in such a situation. We rarely have the same insight when it comes to poorly functioning relationship muscle. No matter how many times we find ourselves in a metaphorical heap on the floor, indeed, rather than concluding that his relationship muscles were faulty, Alvin was convinced Blanca was just simply being unappreciative. As another example, when we falter in our first dating effort after a long, dry spell of being alone, we rarely attribute the result to our having rusted dating skill and weak relationship muscles. Instead, we take the rejection extremely personally and assume it is merely a reflection of our fundamental undesirability. Even once we are aware of the need to strengthen our relationship muscles, we often fail to anticipate how uneven our efforts are likely to be. For example, once I made Serena aware that she might be contributing to her lackluster dating experiences, she was determined to change how she was coming across to her dates. However, her first few efforts were just as unsuccessful, this time because she was trying too hard and appearing too desperate. While improving our social skills is certainly doable, many who experience loneliness face the far more daunting task of developing relationship muscle we have never used before. Serena had no experience with serious dating, and Lionel had little to no experience and a very limited tolerance for casual socializing and small talk. Alban, on the other hand, lacked the ability to empathize, to understand Blanca's needs and feeling well enough to make his effort meaningful to her. In all of these cases, they needed to learn new skills and find the courage to practice them despite the emotional risks involved. Lionel was a good example to someone who regularly overlooked vital information of this sort. I was eventually able to persuade him to approach Stanley, the chess club member whom he enjoyed playing against most, and suggest they grab coffee. We discussed how important it was to present the actual request with a comment or two about the game, so as not to come across as too abrupt. Lionel came into the organization and immediately informed me that he had taken the plunge and asked Stanley to have a coffee with him. Great. So he said yes. He declined. I tried to hide my disappointment. I'm sorry to hear that. Did he say why? He didn't have to. It's because he's a sore loser. Lionel went on to explain that Stanley used to be the best player in the club until Lionel joined, and that he would lose to Lionel regularly ever since. I was dismayed that Lionel had not thought this information important enough to mention earlier. Had he considered things from Stanley's perspective, he might have realized that winning all his games, refusing to interact with the other member, and reading in the corner during breaks made Lionel appear aloof, if not actually disdainful of all the others, Stanley most of all. Understanding a person's need and feeling from his or her perspective is vital for creating and sustaining close friendship and emotional intimacy. When these relationship muscles are weak, we overlook crucial information about how the other person thinks and feels, and our efforts often fail. How to treat the physiological one's loneliness inflict. Many of the circumstances that lead to being lonely are temporary and allow us to recover in a relatively short amount of time. For example, kids usually forge new friendships within hours and days, or starting summer camp, and people whose relationship make them feel lonely might actually feel relief after a separation if they take steps to reconnect with their friends and loved ones with whom they had lost touch. Treating the wounds of loneliness becomes much more urgent when we have been in its grips for extended duration and when we feel discouraged about being able to change our social and emotional isolation. Let's open our physiological medicine cabinet and review our treatment opinion. General treatment guidelines. In addition to the pain and suffering loneliness causes, three other physiological ones require emotional first aid. First, we must identify and change the misperceptions that lead to self-defeating behavior. Although we might struggle to see such a pattern if we have been lonely for some time, they are definitely there. Second, we need to strengthen and enhance our relationship muscle so that our effort to forge new connections and deepen existing relationships will be more successful, meaningful, and satisfying. Third, we need to minimize the ongoing emotional distress loneliness causes, especially in the cases in which the option for improving existing social connection and creating new ones are limited. The treatment that follow are listed in order to which they should be administered. Treatment A. Challenging negative perceptions. And B. Identifying self-defeating behaviors are effective primarily for correcting the misperception loneliness causes and the self-defeating behaviors that results. Treatment C. Talking the other person's perspective. And D. Deepening emotional bonds will help strengthen the relationship muscle crucial for forming new connections or deepening existing ones. Treatment E. Creating opportunities for social connection will help identify new avenue for social engagement. And treatment F. Adopting animals. Discuss way to reduce emotional suffering loneliness in fleek and is especially suited for people with limited option to expand or more to quality of their social connection because of geographic isolation, health or mobility limitation, or other special circumstances. As with all emotional injuries, it is best to treat the one's loneliness in fleek as soon as possible. The longer we go without exercising the full range of our relationship muscles, the more they will atrophy and longer it will take for us to regain their full functionality. Further, rehabilitating muscle of any kind of requires repetition, practice, and patience. If we try to rush our recovery, we are likely to re-injure ourselves and encounter setback and disappointment. And remember, not all forms of loneliness can be remedied by first aid technique alone. At the end of the chapter, I discuss when it is recommended to consult on mental health professionals. Treatment A. Remove your negatively tainted glasses. Loneliness makes us constantly on guard, preparing for the disappointment and rejection we are sure will come. As a result, we miss the opportunity to make social connections, and we behave in ways that push others away. In order to challenge this distorted perception and avoid acting in the self-defeating ways, we need to do three things. 1. Fight the pessimism. Loneliness makes our mind generate instant negative thoughts as soon as we contemplate engaging in social interactions. We get invited to the party and vivid scenes of awkwardness, rejection, disappointment pop into our head entirely unbidden. We become convinced we don't know anyone there. We envision ourselves standing alone by the hummus and vegetable dip, feeling conspicuous and impressed. The thought of approaching a stranger or worse, a group of strangers, and initiating a conversation is enough to cause a sense of panic, and we anticipate any such effort ending disastrously. Although we are unlikely to prevent pessimistic scenario from elbowing their way into our thoughts, the best way to fight our fears and pessimism is to purposefully visualize scenarios of success that are both reasonable and realistic. By picturing successful outcome in our mind, we are more likely to recognize such opportunity when they arise and to take advantage of them. For example, we could acknowledge that it is just as likely for people to a party to be friendly, welcoming, and happy to chat with us, even if we don't meet new people. It is as possible we would have a perfectly nice time catching up with the one or two folk we do know. We might even end the night by making plans to see them again in the near future. Lionel had to overcome The belief that none of the other players in the chess club were interested in socializing with him. Once Stanley turned him down, he was extremely reluctant to approach anyone else. The first thought of business was to have Lionel see in this part and creating the situation. You have been seeing these things too negatively, Lionel, I explained. True, they haven't asked you to hang out, but you also haven't given them any reason to do so. They know nothing about you, nothing about your life, and nothing about your total feeling. So you also think it's pointless? Lionel nodded. No, I'm not saying the opposite. I'm saying it's not as bleak as it seems, and that you can do something about it. Let me get to know you. Chat a little, exchange pleasantries, fetch about the weather, or ask about their weekend, exchange. Yeah, make the effort for a couple of weekends. Are you sure you will be far more open to hanging out? Even Stanley. Lionel was extremely hesitant to initiate conversation with the chess club member, but when I appealed to his military experience and presented the challenge as a mission we had yet to accomplish, he finally agreed. After a few weeks of occasional chatting, he mustered the courage to ask another member to coffee. They met at the dinner several weeks later. I told Lionel how impressed I was with his effort. I know it was difficult to open up and start chatting, but I am so glad you did. I'm sure it made a difference with other club members as well. Who knows, I added. Maybe you and Stanley will have a coffee one day after all? That will never happen, Lionel said immediately. Here is that negativity again, I cautioned him. It just won't happen, Lionel insisted. Really? Why not? Because Stanley's dead. Lionel told me Stanley has died 2 weeks earlier. His death led to the other members talking more among themselves and getting closer. They decided to attend Stanley's memorial service later in the month, and when they did, Lionel went with them to give the benefit of the doubt. Another misperception loneliness burden us with is that we tend to assume the worst about how others feel about us. Toby, a young man who had recently lost his job, was devastated when the holiday season approached and he failed to receive an invitation to his good friend's annual Christmas party. Toby was convinced his friend no longer wanted to be associated with him because he had been fired. Since I knew Toby's email had recently changed, I suggested he check his spam folder. Lo and behold, there was no invitation where it had been all along. Toby had spent the better part of 2 weeks feeling betrayed and mourning the loss of friendship that was still perfectly intact. Loneliness might make us question how our friends feel about us, but we should always balance our dope with the reminders of our mutual history and the shared experience that created to sustain the friendship over time. Doing so will help reassure us that our friendship are probably a lot more stable than our loneliness fuel. Fears might lead us to believe. Serena, the high school teacher who had gone from heavy to bombshell, was also quick to judge others and their intention toward her. She was certain any man who expressed an interest in her did so lowly because of her appearance had no intention of getting to know the real her. Although appearance had no intention of getting to know the real her, although men were unquestionably drawn to her appearance, they definitely care about her personality. Indeed, it was her close and guarded behavior that made most of them reluctant to ask her out again. A close of years later, at a social event, Serena bumped into one of the men she thought he had rejected her. She was extremely surprised when he introduced her to his friends as Serena, the beauty who dumped me after one date. Clearly, he had mistaken her guardedness for disinterest. Had Serena given him the benefit of the doubt and expressed interest, he would have happily initiated the second date. Understandable as our fears are when we already feel lonely and leery of rejection, indulging them would only bring about the very thing we seek to avoid. Instead, we must battle the internal side of skepticism we feel and give the new people in our life and the ones with whom we have existing relationship the benefit of the doubt. 3. Take actions. Chronic loneliness causes us to perceive ourselves as a passive victim of our harsh circumstances, and we feel helpless to change our social, emotional, and intimate isolation. Such a feeling, powerful as they might be, are nonetheless founded on perceptions that are too negative and pessimistic There are always steps we can take to improve our situation. It is important to do so because taking action of any kind will make us feel better about ourselves as well as about our prospect. Lionel had a room full of chess players from which to choose. When it came to making new friends, Serena had numerous men clamoring for her attention, and Toby had plenty of people from his former job who were interested in continuing a friendship with him. Yet loneliness made all of them perceive their situation as one in which their options were severely limited. Exercise for identifying avenue for social connection. The following writing exercise will help identify potential action you can take to expand and deepen your social connection and by doing so, counter feeling of helplessness. 1. Go through your phone number, email addresses, and social media contact and make a list of people you consider friends or good acquaintances. 2. For each person, note when you last saw or communicated with him or her and create a master list of people you haven't been in touch with for a while. 3. Prioritize your list by ranking all of the people on it according to who in the past has made you feel best about being you. Your final ranking represents the order in which you should contact the people on your list. Reach out to at least 1 or 2 people a weekend, but when possible, initiate plans to meet. 4. Go to websites that list meeting or activity that scroll through their categories. 5. Identify at least 3 activity and topic you might want to pursue, like book club, adult education classes, hiking or biking groups. Search online for meeting in your area. Use your list to recharge your old friendship and to explore venue for creating new ones. Treatment B. Identify your self-defeating behavior. Loneliness makes us approach people with caution and suspicious, and our hesitancy usually comes across loud and clear the others, prompting them to retreat from our bad vibe. We then feel crushed and conclude we were right, created a self-fulfilling prophecy often eludes us entirely, as is often true in life. When we act out of fear, we risk fighting the very thing we hope to avoid. But if our self-defeating judgment and behavior seems completely justified in our own minds, how are we to identify those that are self-sabotaging? The truth is that while we are often blind to our self-defeating behavior in the moment, we are much better at identifying them in hindsight. For example, we might feel justified and keep to ourselves at a social event if the few people we know are already engaged in other conversation, but once our social anxiety has diminished the next day, we would probably recognize that we could have simply joined their conversation or introduced ourselves to at least 1 or 2 people we didn't know. More important, we tend to repeat the same self-defeating behavior in a variety of situations, which should make identifying them easier once we are alerted to their existence. Once we recognize that these tendencies are weak, we can become more mindful of them and catch them in action going forward, so consider yourself alerted. While the notion of analyzing our own behavior accurately might seem daunting at first, when I ask patients to reflect on their social encounter and identify their error, they typically do so quietly successfully. Once we accept the basic premise that at least some of our actions are not serving us well, we should be able to start identifying things we have said and done that might have had unintended consequences. For example, Serena was quick to recognize that she asked her dates very few questions about themselves, and that such summation probably led her dates to conclude she had little interest in them. In addition, her anxiety was such that she rarely smiled when she was on the date, and she was certainly too tense to laugh. Once she realized this, she thought back on her dates with a dismay with this night. They must have thought I really was not enjoying their company. Guess I'm on one heck of a Lucy date. Lucy, I agreed, which made Serena laugh, but whether you continue to be is up to you. Serena's self-sabotaging behavior are by no means unusual. Other common forms of self-defeating behavior are finding poor excuses to turn down invitation to social events, skipping spontaneous get-togetherness because you are unprepared either emotionally or otherwise, neglecting to convey birthday wishes or other celebratory messages to friends, and language, responding with curt and monosyllabic Syllabic sentences are over-talking and hogging the conversation, neglecting to ask others about their life and opinion, and confessing your faults and insecurities to people who you have just met. Exercise to identify self-defeating behaviors. Take time to reflect on how you might come across to your friends, colleagues, and loved ones, or when you are on a date, or any other type of social engagement. Try to identify at least 3 behaviors, including omissions such as not conveying interest. And even if they seem entirely justified, and even if they seem relatively minor, then that might be pushing other people away. One, my self-defeating behaviors are: once you have identified what you might be doing incorrectly, be extremely mindful of avoiding such behavior in the future. Keep your list handy and read it before you attend social engagement. Self-defeating mechanisms can be changed once you have identified them correctly, but don't expect to eliminate them all at once. As we will see in the next section, all social skills require practice. Treatment summary. Identify behaviors that work against you. Dosage. Administer full treatment as soon as possible after unsuccessful social interactions. Make sure to go over your list before attending any forthcoming social interactions so you can be as mindful as possible to minimize self-defeating behavior. Effective for improving social and romantic interactions, avoiding self-defeating behavior, and correcting painful misperceptions. Secondary benefit: reduce emotional suffering. Treatment C. Take the other person's perspective. Relationships of any kind are always about give and take, but to give successfully, we have to be able to take the other person's point of view. Known as perspective taking, accurately reading another person's point of view is a vital relationship muscle. It allows us to understand their priorities and their motivation, to anticipate their behavior, and even to predict their reactions. It enhances our ability to negotiate and cooperate successfully, to strategize and problem solve, to communicate effectively, and to access our compassion, altruism, and empathy. Loneliness and social isolation weaken our perspective-taking muscles and make us far more likely to commit social gaffes, or to come across as inappropriate, to eager, or to detach. The fastest way to rehabilitate this relationship muscle is to identify our perspective-taking blunder and to correct them. The following 3 errors are the most important to keep in mind, as they represent our most frequent oversights. 1. Failing to engage our perspective-taking muscle when we should. As simplistic as it may sound, the reason we usually don't understand the other person's perspective is we never tried to in the first place. Perspective-taking is a mental exercise, not a mind-reading trick. If we don't make the effort to think out through how other people might see things, how they might react, or how their agenda might be different from our own, we are unlikely to take such a consideration into account when interacting with them. One common manifestation of this omission involves our use of humor. When we are considering whether to tell a joke, we typically give almost exclusive priority to whether we find the joke funny and fail to consider whether it will be funny to others. Alban, thought referring to his wife as the other women, was hilarious, while Blanca obviously did not. Had Alban given even a moment's thoughtful to how she reacted to the joke in the past, her feeling about it would have been immediately obvious to him. 2. We favor our own point of view. Our own perspective is so apparent to us that we often fail to give the other person's point of view sufficient weight. For example, scientists studied how people interpret sincere versus sarcastic phone messages, and thus communicated by email. We are all aware that written messages lack tonal cues that help the recipient understand our intended meaning. Yet, time and again, we anticipate reader will be able to distinguish between our sincere and sarcastic email messages with the same accuracy as they would a phone message. And time and again, we are surprised to discover that our messages are taken the wrong way. The reason this happens is that although we are aware electronic communication can easily be misinterpreted, we tend to assume such an error are the reader's fault. But research clearly demonstrates it is the person who sends the message whose assumptions are faulty. To correct this specific error, we must give sufficient weight on to how the other person might reinterpret our electronic communications. 3. We consider the wrong information. We often fail to consider accurate information that could potentially provide insight into another person's point of view, but happily consider inaccurate information. For example, when evaluating the preferences of people we perceive as similar to us, we tend to use ourselves as reference. People we perceive as similar to us, we tend to use ourselves as a reference point. But when we perceive others as being less similar, we are more likely to resort to stereotypes to assess their preferences. Once we consider how this dynamic might play out in a given scenario, it becomes clear why Grandpa ended up with 23 pair of woolen socks for Christmas, but without the candle he would be hinting at since Thanksgiving. Perspective-taking error in intimate relationship. The more familiar we are with another person, the more accurate our effort to understand their point of view we should be. As such, we might assume that the longer a couple has been together, the fewer perspective-taking error they make with one another. But as most couple therapists can attest, couples who has been together the longest are often those who exhibit the most perspective-taking flops. Why does this happen? Unfortunately, it is the couples of very familiarity with one another that trips them up. The more time we have spent with our partner, the more confident we feel in our ability to assess his or her point of view without giving it too much thought. Perspective-taking error 1. In action. However, since familiarity with a person rarely beats out the ability to read the person's mind, such confidence is likely to land us in the doghouse more often than not. This blind spot can be extremely troublesome for intimate relationships, for example. Partners often dread birthdays and Valentine's Day for this exact reason. One thing, why can my spouse ever get it right? And the other, no matter how much trouble I go to, nothing is ever good enough. In reality, neither person is taking the time to examine things from the partner's point of view. If they did, they would communicate with one another and clarify their expectation ahead of time, rather than just playing out the same gift-giving debacle year after year. Of course, having such a relationship discussion is not always easy. One of the reasons Blanca initiated couples therapy with Alban was that he tended to calm up whenever she tried discussing relationship issue with him. Indeed, women are often more proficient than their husband at discussing their feeling and expectation, which can make the men feel they are fighting a losing battle. Rather than saying the wrong thing, they prefer to say nothing and get their inevitable defeat over with as soon as possible. The best way for women to fight this tendency is to avoid out-talking their partner. Women should give men the space and leeway to express their thoughts and even to restate them if their words do not reflect their true intent. When men are more proficient at emotional expression than their partner, they should take similar precautions. In short, we should always ask ourselves how the other person's point of view might differ from our own. We should give weight to what we know about their priorities and preferences, to their history of the relationship between us, and to the context of the current situation. Taking a few minutes to answer such a question can save hours of relationship talk to smooth over a situation that could have been prevented had we effort to think through the other person's perspective ahead of time. Treatment summary: take the other person's perspective. Dosage: administer full treatment and practice frequently. Do not get discouraged by initial failure, as building and improving these skills takes both time and practice. Treatment D. Deepen your emotional bonds. Empathy involves stepping into another person's shoes in order to gain an understanding of their emotional experience and then conveying our insight to them convincingly, rather than merely acquiring their point of view as we do when perspective taking. We seek a deeper understanding so we can glimpse how they actually feel. Much as we do with perspective taking, we regularly overestimate our capacity to employ empathy successfully. One of the reasons this happens is that empathy is not necessarily an easy skill. It requires a steady mind trick of sort, albeit one we do to our own minds specifically. We have to direct our awareness to a place it does not automatically go, to what it actually feels like to be another person. Linger there for a moment until we register the other person's emotional landscape, and then return to our own reality. Surveys of college students have found that their empathy skills have decreased significantly over the past 30 years, which probably reflect a larger societal trend. Most of us could use a tune-up when it comes to both our empathy and perspective-taking skills. For example, Alban had trouble understanding why his wife Blanca was so angry with him for leaving the flower and card he got her for Valentine's Day on the kitchen counter. After all, he would not only remember Valentine's Day, but despite the huge amount of work waiting for him when he got home, he would take the time to stop and get his wife tokens of his affection. When I asked Alban to consider things from Blanca's point of view, he quickly conceded he would screw up. But he just didn't understand why his good intention counted for so little. How to assess our empathy? The only way to gain insight as to how other people feel is to imagine ourselves in their situation, not just for a second or two, but until we can use our own emotional compass to point out how they might be feeling. To do so accurately, we need a good sense of their emotional landscape, the context leading up to the situation in question. For example, I asked Alban to consider Blanca's expectation, how she might have experienced the 2 hours between the time he arrived home and when she discovered the carton flower on the kitchen counter. She saw me working in the study, Alban said, thinking aloud, but she didn't see the flower because they were in the kitchen. Alban's eyebrows shot up and he turned to Blanca. You thought I would forget on Valentine's Day again? That's why you didn't respond me when I said the good night? Blanca nodded. I asked Alban to continue the exercise, not taking that into consideration. How did Blanca react when she saw you in the study? She didn't, Alban said. She must have been upset, but she didn't say anything because I was working, so she was being considerate, I said. Alban nodded. So how was she feeling right before she discovered the flower in the kitchen? She was upset and disappointed, but he decided to be considerate and not discuss it with me until I finished working. For 2 whole hours, I pointed out. She sat on the feeling for 2 hours, you go to bed, and only then does she pass by the kitchen and sees the flower and cards on the counter. Alban continued, and damn. He turned to Blanca. You must have thought I don't even care enough to hand them to you in person. Blanca nodded. You made effort to contain your disappointment all evening, and I couldn't even take a moment to hand you the flowers in person. Blanca nodded, exhaling deeply. Alban put his arm around her. Slowly, she softened into his embrace. I'm such an ass. Alban whispered, how do you stand me? You don't make it difficult. Blanca responded with a brief smile. Alban quickly promised that to take Blanca out for a belated Valentine's dinner to make it up to her. I continued to work with Blanca and Alban for several months. Alban had done a good job exercising his sympathy muscle in the session, but it takes more than a single empathy workout to build up relationship muscle to their full strength. Alban continued to practice using empathy, and the more he persisted, the happier he and Blanca became. Over time and with lots of work, their strained and distant marriage changed to one in which they both felt frustrated, supported, and cared for by the other. Improving our empathy skills will do wonder for our most important relationship. The caring and consideration that empathy convey can spark the cycle of goodwill, affection, generosity of spirit that radically deepens bonds of marriage, family, and friendship. Obviously, this works best when both people are strengthening their empathy muscle with one another at the same time, but even unilateral effort can bear significant fruit because of the practice the skill require. We should endeavor to practice our empathy muscle in a variety of situations, and with numerous people. In doing so, we should seek opportunity to anticipate how people might feel about future situations, as well as past one. Keep the following in mind. Visualize yourself in their situation. The best way to assess another person's emotional experience is to visualize yourself in his or her situation in an immersive manner as possible. Take notice of the surrounding environment, who else in there, the time of day, the person's mood, and any physical pain or ills the person may be suffering from. Imagine how you come across to him or her, not how you actually feel, but what you experience feelings that are contradictory. For example, when Blanca found the flower on the kitchen counter, she probably felt pleased that Alban had made the effort, even though she also felt hurt, disappointed, and angry that he would execute it poorly. Context is key. Understanding someone's feeling involves having at least a rough sense of his or her frame of mind at the time. The following questions are ones you might want to consider. What are this person's previous experiences with similar situation? What fears, doubts, hopes, or expectations might he or she have about the situation? What else is happening in his or her life at the time? What has his or her day been like up to this point? How might other relationships be impacting his or her responses? Convey your insight thoughtfully. Having insight into another person's feeling only matter if we can convey our understanding convincingly and compassionately. Knowing how someone feels but communicating it poorly is a key to buying him or her flowers and then leaving them on a kitchen counter. Be as descriptive as possible. The more the other person realizes you have put thought and effort into appreciating his or her point of view, the more impact your empathy-informed communication you will have. Treatment E. Create opportunities for social connections. Loneliness makes us extremely hesitant to create new opportunities for social engagement or to take advantage of existing ones. We feel uncomfortable attending social events, we hate traveling by ourselves, and we are reluctant to sign up for new activity or social group because we dread showing up alone. We might see options for social activity around us, but we fear coming across as losers and loners, and in fighting the very stigma of loneliness we are desperate to escape. The best way to overcome feeling of vulnerability, reduce our hesitancy, and avoid being labeled as lonely is to approach situation with a larger goal in mind. For example, participating in a speed dating event would feel far less uncomfortable if we were doing so as research for an article on our blog, our college's newspaper. We would be far less apprehensive about signing up to a tour with other singles if we were amateur photographer or artists and plan to paint, sketch, or photograph the sites we visited for our portfolios, and we would find it easier to join a swimming, biking, or running group if we were training for a triathlon. By having an additional agenda, we come across not as someone who is lonely, but as someone who is passionate about our hobby, devoted to our goals, or serious about our creative endeavors. Having a larger goal also helps reduce insecurity and self-consciousness because our attention is focused on the tasks at hand, documenting our speed dates, creating art of our portfolio, or making it through the triathlon. Go online. The internet allows us to connect the people with whom we might share common interests and experience without leaving our home. It also allows us to adopt identities through which we can interact with others and express ourselves in a way that might not be possible in our regular life. For example, the secondlife.com is a three-dimensional virtual world where users interact with one another using a digital representation of their own choosing. Users can switch gender, make themselves older or younger, choose how attractive they would like to be, and give themselves various other characteristics and abilities. The interaction in a Second Life cover the gamut from chatting to virtual meeting, from conducting business to constructing homes, and participants report having meaningful friendship and all relationship with one another. Relationship and friendship that start online can be substantial, and they often translate into the personal interaction. For example, a recent study found that online dating is now the second most common way couples meet, surprising previous romantic venues such as bars, clubs, and a vegetable aisle in the local supermarket on Sunday afternoon. Volunteers to help others. Another option for creating new social bonds is to volunteer. Helping others reduce feeling of loneliness increases feeling of self-worth and makes us feel more socially desirable to others. Helping others contribute to more happier and greater life satisfaction, and it can also reduce our fear and hesitancy about engaging with new people. By setting out to give rather than get. We can focus on the person in need instead of on ourselves, which in turn makes us feel less self-conscious, less insecure, and less vulnerable. Treatment F. Adopt a best friend. In some cases, circumstances may prevent us from creating new social bonds or enhancing existing ones. People with limited mobility who are isolated geographically or who cannot reach out to others for various reasons frequently adopt pets to soothe feeling of loneliness. Dogs are great, cats also. Soothing feeling of loneliness in people who are isolated, elderly, or dealing with a significant illness or physiological injury such as post-traumatic stress disorder. Attesting to the singular therapeutic power of our canine friends, one study had lonely people spend time alone with a dog or with cat rather than with person. Those who spend time alone with pets reported feeling significantly less lonely than those who shared the company of the dog with another person. Whether the other persons in the study were informed, they convinced the second to animal that ran out of the toilet and licked themselves in the unknown. Despite the many advantages of dog therapy or cat therapy, adopting any pet, especially a dog or cat, is a huge responsibility and one that some of us cannot undertake for practical reasons. Cats have been studied less frequently than dogs, but they too can provide significant companion, and they are easier to care for than dogs, especially by people who are homebound. Chapter 3. Loss and Trauma. Walking on Broken Bones. Loss and trauma are inevitably part of life, and their effects are often devastating. Losing a loved one, being victim of violence or crime, becoming disabled, develop a chronic life-threatening illness, being exposed to terrorism or war, or living through other life-threatening and traumatic experiences can derail our life and leave deep psychological wounds. Healing such a wound usually involves an extended process of readjustment and recovery that can be different for each of us. Much like broken bones that need to be set correctly, how we can go about putting the pieces of our life back together after loss of trauma makes us huge differences in how fully we recover from such event. Some of the losses and traumas we experiences are so deeply scarring they require the skill of expert mental health professional and probably extended psychotherapy. As such, this chapter is not intended for those who have suffered extremely adverse impact, and such readers are strongly advised to seek help from a trained mental health professional if they have not already done so. However, many of the losses traumatic experiences we sustain in life are not severe enough to cause long-term physiological or emotional damage. For example, when we lose our job, when our best friend drops us after a bad argument, or when the elderly grandparent dies, we go through a period of sadness and adjustment, but we usually return to our previous level period of sadness and adjust, but we usually return to our previous level of physiological and emotional health. However, the same loss can have different subjective meaning to different people. For example, if losing our job caused our family to become homeless, if our best friend was also our only friend, or if our grandparent raised us and had been in good health, the loss we experience and the impact it has on our life can be far more substantial. Whatever differences we might exhibit in how we can cope with loss and trauma, we all face similar challenges when it comes to rebuilding our life and achieving a full emotional and physiological recovery. We have to reset our broken physiological bonds, reassemble the pieces of our life back into a well-integrated and fully functional whole. Treating the physiological wounds, loss and trauma inflict can not only accelerate our recovery, but in some cases make it possible to emerge from such experiences with meaningful change in our priorities, a deeper appreciation of our existing relationship, an enhanced sense of purpose, and greater life satisfactions, a phenomenon known as post-traumatic growth. While many of the variables that determine whether we emerge from loss and trauma with diminished or enhanced emotional well-being are not in our control, some are. In order to best utilize the emotional first aid treatment in the chapter, we will need a clear understanding of the physiological wound loss and trauma inflict and the challenge they present to our mental health and emotional well-being. The psychological wounds loss and trauma inflict. In addition to the severe emotional distress they caused and the real-world changes we have to contend with in their aftermath, loss and trauma inflict three physiological wounds, each of which represent a different set of wounds that need to be reset. First, loss and trauma can create such a havoc in our life that they threaten our self-perception, our roles, and our very sense of identity. Second, tragic events often challenge our fundamental assumption about the world and our place in it, such that we struggle to make sense of the event or to integrate them into the larger framework of our belief system. Third, many of us find it difficult to remain connected to the people and activity we used to find meaningful, and we might even feel as if re-engaging in our life will represent a betrayal to those who we have lost, or a discounting of the suffering we have experienced. Emotional pain engulfs all who experience loss and trauma, but the extent to which we encounter these three physiological ones can vary dramatically. Some of us might experience them only in mild form, while others might find their life profoundly impacted by them for years and even decades. Let's examine each of them in a greater detail.